नमस्कार श्रोताओं, आप सभी का स्वागत है RSVI के इस नए सेगमेंट में जिसका शीर्षक है Significant Constitutional Amendments. The First Amendment Act 1951. It empowered the state to make the advancement of socially and economically backward classes. It provided for the saving of laws, providing for the acquisition of estates, etc. It also added ninth schedule to protect the land reform and other laws included in it from the judicial review. It added 3 more grounds of restrictions on freedom of speech and expression, that is public order, friendly relations with foreign states, and incitement to an offense. Also made the restrictions reasonable and thus justiciable in nature. It provided that state trading and nationalization of any trade or business by the state is not to be invalid on the ground of violation of the right to trade or business. Second, the Constitution or the Sixth Amendment Act of 1956. It included a new subject in the Union list, that is, taxes on the sale and purchase of goods in the course of interstate trade and commerce, and restricted the state's power in this regard. Third, the Constitution, the Eighth Amendment Act of 1960. It extended the period of reservation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies till 1970 by amending Article 334. Fourth, the Constitution or the 10th Amendment Act of 1961. It incorporated Dadra, Nagar, and Haveli as a union territory consequent to their acquisition from Portugal. It also amended Article 240 of the Constitution. Fifth, the Constitution or the 13th Amendment Act of 1963. The formation of Nagaland with special protection under Article 370A and also amended Article 170. Sixth, the Constitution or the 15th Amendment Act of 1963. It enabled the High Courts to issue writs to any person or authority even outside its territorial jurisdiction if the cause of action arises within its territorial limits. It also increased the retirement age of High Court judges from 60 to 62 years. It provided for appointment of retired judges of the High Court as acting judges of the same court. It also provided compensatory allowance to judges who are transferring from one High Court to another. It enabled the retired judge of the High Court to act as an ad hoc judge of Supreme Court. It provided for the procedure for determining the age of Supreme Court and High Court judges. Seventh, the Constitution or 24th Amendment Act 1971. It affirmed the power of Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution, including fundamental rights. It also made it compulsory for the President to give his assent to a Constitution Amendment Bill. Eighth, the Constitution or 31st Amendment Act of 1973. It increased the elective strength of the Lok Sabha from 525 to 545. Under this, the upper limit of representatives of the state goes up from 500 to 525 and that of the UTs decreases from 25 to 20. Ninth, the Constitution or 36th Amendment Act of 1975. Sikkim was made the 22nd state of the Indian Union. 10th, the Constitution or 37th Amendment Act of 1975. It was passed by the Parliament on April 26, 1975 to provide for a legislative assembly and a council of ministers to Arunachal Pradesh, the country's northeasternmost union. 11th, the Constitution or 39th Amendment Act 1975 places beyond challenge in courts the election to Parliament of a person holding the office of Prime Minister or Speaker and the election of President and Vice President. 12th, the Constitution or 40th Amendment Act 1976. It was enacted during the period of internal emergency. It established beyond a doubt the supremacy of Parliament over the other wings of government, gave the directive principles precedence over the fundamental rights, enumerated for the first time 10 fundamental duties. It also imposed limits on the power and jurisdiction of the judiciary, raised the term of Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha from 5 to 6 years, authorized the use of central armed forces in any state to deal with law and order problems, made the President bound by the advice of councils of ministers, and envisaged the establishment of administrative tribunals for service matters of government employees and also other tribunals for economic offences. It also laid down that no constitutional amendment could be questioned in any court. 13th, the Constitution of 43rd Amendment Act of 1978. It repealed the obnoxious provisions of the Constitution, the 42nd Amendment Act, passed during the emergency. It restores civil liberties by deleting Article 31D, which gave powers to the Parliament to curtail even legitimate trade union activity, under the guise of legislation for the prevention of anti-national activities. The new law, which was ratified by more than half of the states, in accordance with the Constitution, also restores legislative powers to these states to make appropriate provisions for anti-national activities consistent with the fundamental rights. Under the Act, the judiciary has also been restored to its rightful place. The Supreme Court will now have the power to invalidate state laws, a power taken away by the previous amendment. The High Courts will also be able to go into the question of the constitutional validity of central laws, thereby enabling persons living in distant places to obtain speedy justice without having to come to the Supreme Court. 14th, the Constitution or the 44th Amendment Act 1978. The Act removes major distortion in the Constitution introduced during the emergency. The duration of the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies has been reduced from 6 to 5 years, the normal term, which was extended during the emergency. The right to property ceases to be a fundamental right and becomes only one legal right according to the amendment. The Act also extends, for the first time since independence, constitutional protection for publication of the proceedings of Parliament in state legislatures, except in cases where it is proved to be malicious. Another important feature of the Act is that any proclamation of emergency needs to henceforward be issued by the President only after receiving the advice of the Cabinet as a whole in writing. The President will not be called upon to act on the basis of advice by the Prime Minister on his own without consulting his Cabinet. Other safeguards provide that the proclamation will have to be adopted by 2/3 majority of the member of both houses of parliament within a month. 15th, the Constitution or 52nd Amendment Act of 1985. It made defection to another party after elections illegal. Any members defecting to another party after the elections will be disqualified from being member of the parliament or state legislature. 16th, the Constitution of 53rd Amendment Act 1986. It confers statehood on Mizoram and ensures against unnecessary interference by the central government with the laws relating to spheres of social relationship and community conduct applicable to Mizoram. 17th, the Constitution of 55th Amendment Act 1987. It grants statehood to Arunachal Pradesh, which consequently became the 24th state of the Indian Union. 18th, the Constitution of 56th Amendment Act 1987. It confers statehood on Goa and forms a union territory of Daman and Diu. Goa thus becomes the 24th state of Indian Republic. 19th, the Constitution of 58th Amendment Act 1988. It provides for special arrangements with regard to reservation of seats for scheduled tribes in the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram, and Meghalaya. By amending the Article 322, the adjustment of seats has been frozen until 2000. 20th, the Constitution of 59th Amendment Act 1988. It empowered the central government to impose emergency in Punjab when deemed necessary. Under the amendment, the president's rule can be extended up to 3 years. 21st, the Constitution or 61st Amendment Act 1989. It lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. 22nd, the Constitution or 62nd Amendment Act 1989. It provided for the extension by another 10 years of reservation of seats in the parliament and state assemblies for the scheduled castes and tribes and the reservation for the Anglo-Indian community by nomination. 23rd, the Constitution or the 63rd Amendment Act 1989. It repealed Amendment 59, which empowered the government to impose emergency in Punjab. 24th, the Constitution or the 64th Amendment Act 1990. It extended the president's rule in Punjab by 6 months. 25th, the Constitution 66th Amendment Act 1990. It brought land reforms within the purview of 9th Schedule of the Constitution. 26th, the Constitution 69th Amendment Act 1991. Delhi was made the National Capital Region. The Act also made provision for Legislative Assembly and a Council of Ministers for Delhi. 27th, the Constitution 70th Amendment Act 1992. Before this act was made, Article 54 relating to election of the President provided for an electoral college consisting only of the elected members of the Parliament as well as state legislative assemblies, but not of union territories. The amendment provided for the inclusion of members of the legislature of Pondicherry and Delhi. 28. The Constitution or the 71st Amendment Act 1992. It amends the 8th schedule to include Konkani, Manipuri and Nepali languages. 29th, the Constitution 72nd Amendment Act 1992 to make temporary provisions for the determination of number of seats reserved for STs in the State Assembly of Tripura, until the readjustment of seat is made on the basis of first census after the year 2000 under Article 170 of the Constitution. 30th, the Constitution or the 73rd Amendment Act 1992 to ensure direct elections to all seats in panchayats, to reserve seats for SCs and STs in proportion to their population, and for reservation of not less than 1/3 of the seats in panchayats for women. 31st, the Constitution of the 74th Amendment Act 1992 to ensure direct elections to all seats in Nagar Palikas and municipalities. 32nd, the Constitution or the 75th Amendment Act 1994 provides for setting up of state-level rent tribunals to exclude the jurisdiction of all courts except that of the Supreme Court under Article 136. 33. The Constitution or the 76th Amendment Act 1994. It relates to the reservation of seats in educational institutes and of appointment or posts in the services under a state for backward classes, SCs and STs. The Supreme Court had ruled in 1992 that the total reservations under Article 16 of Schedule 40th should not exceed 50%. 34th, the Constitution of the 80th Amendment Act 2000. It deals with an alternative scheme for sharing taxes between the union and the state. 35th, the Constitution of the 81st Amendment Act of 2000. It provided that the unfilled vacancies of a year reserved for SC or ST kept for being filled up in a year as per Article 16 shall be considered separately for filling vacancies in a succeeding year, and the previous list will not be considered fulfilling the 50% quota of the respective year. 36th, the Constitution or the 82nd Amendment Act 2000. It provides that nothing in Article 355 shall prevent the state from making any provisions in favor of the members of SC, ST for relaxation and qualifying marks with respect to examination or job or promotion. 37. The Constitution or the 84th Amendment Act of 2001. It extended ban on the readjustment of seats in the Lok Sabha and the state legislature assemblies for another 25 years, that is up to 2026, with the same objective of encouraging population limiting measures. 38th, the Constitution or 86th Amendment Act 2002. It provides the right to education until the age of 14 and clear and early childhood care until the age of 6. 39th, the Constitution or the 87th Amendment Act 2003. It provided for your adjustment and rationalizations of territorial constituencies in the states on the basis of the population figures of the 2001 census and not the 1991 census as provinced earlier. 40th, the Constitution or the 88th Amendment Act 2003. It made provision for service tax. 41, the Constitution or the 89th Amendment Act 2003, bifurcating the erstwhile combined National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes into two separate bodies, namely National Commission of SCs and National Commission of STs. 42nd, the Constitution or the 90th Amendment Act 2003. It provided for maintaining the erstwhile representation of the scheduled tribes in the Assam Legislative Assembly from the Bodoland Territorial Areas District. 43. The Constitution or the 91st Amendment Act 2004. It restricted the size of Council of Ministers to 15% of legislative members and strengthened the anti-defection laws. 44. The Constitution or the 93rd Amendment Act 2006. It provided for 27% reservation for other backward classes in government as well as private higher educational institutions. 45th, the Constitution or the 94th Amendment Act 2006. To provide for all Minister of Tribal Welfare in the newly created Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh states, including Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. 46th, the Constitution or the 95th Amendment Act 2010. It extended the reservation of seats for SCs and STs in Lok Sabha and state assemblies from 60 to 70 years. 47th, the Constitution or the 99th Amendment Act 2014. This amendment provided for the formation of National Judicial Appointments Commission. 48th, the Constitution or the 100th Amendment Act of 2015. It relates to the land boundary agreement between India and Bangladesh. 49th, the Constitution or the 101st Amendment Act 2017. It introduced the goods and services tax in the country since 1st July 2017. 50th, the Constitution or the 102nd Amendment Act 2018. It gave constitutional status to National Commission for Backward Classes. 51. The Constitution or the 103rd Amendment Act 2019. It provided a maximum of 10% reservation for economically weaker sections. 52. The Constitution or the 104th Amendment Act 2020. It extended the reservation of seats for SCs and STs in Lok Sabha and state assemblies. 53rd, the Constitution or the 105th Amendment Act 2021. It restored state governments' power to prepare the socially and educationally backward classes list. 54th, the Constitution 106th Amendment Act 2023. It reserves 1/3 of seats for women in the Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies, and legislative assemblies of the National Capital Territory of Delhi. Dhanyavad.